Thank you. I'm your host, Anthony Mitchell, and thank you for watching the Median Society. Tonight, we have a great guest. This guest is a woman that leads with her heart and her soul, has the spirit that wants to, the spirit and the desire to help all those that need help. There's not a day that goes by that she doesn't ever think of some new way that she can reach in and help people with jobs and just the betterment of their community. Her name is Councilwoman Liz Darden. Tonight we're going to get a chance to explore and talk with her and see what she's doing in Harrison, Arkansas. Councilwoman Liz Darden, thank you so much for stepping up on the Median Society. I really appreciate you stopping by, and we're going to get a chance to chat with you tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a wonderful, warm welcome. I'm excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question. What does take care of the least of these mean to you?
Take care of the least of these. I think it's important in life to lead with a servant heart and take care of the least. Don't forget those who have been pushed to the side in society. And what does that mean? We can't win at life if we see other people struggling. That's the basis of it. If you see someone on the street knowing they're lacking a resource or a tool that you might be able to provide, even if it's just a smile or words of encouragement, you could provide to uplift them in that moment in time, to inspire them to move forward. I think it's just so important just to consider other. I think one of the things that we're lacking in our society today is empathy as a whole. That's what it means.
Gotcha. I remember we were walking down the street in downtown DC this past summer, last summer. And one of the things that really struck me about you was your caring and concern for homeless. What are some of the things you guys are doing in Harrison to try to help your homeless problem there?
Right. Homeless is a problem across the board in our country. There's a housing crisis, an affordable housing crisis at that. And while we aren't specifically meeting the needs of the homeless in Harrison, we are providing a complex 30 units of affordable housing for individuals who have already gone through the existing programs in Harrison and have a housing voucher, looking for an affordable place to live, but there's not enough housing available in this community. So we were implementing a 30-unit complex to provide housing to at least 30 families, and that's just a starting point. We're experiencing a lot of pushback, unfortunately, due to our mission at large on a national and world, or I would say global level.
How would you say that others can actually mimic that same thing across the board? I know that it's different for smaller towns and larger cities, but it's still the same. We're still trying to get federal dollars into these environments to help assist the local municipalities with whatever their funding is also. How can you see people mimicking some of this?
One is to admit the fact that there is an issue. I'm seeing it. There are individuals in the community in which I live who are in denial about the fact that there are homeless and people struggling. And so they tend to just push them to the side. They kick them out of the parks and make them go somewhere else. And they see a few here and there, but aren't realizing there are many people living in homes with 5 or 6 families in one home in a 2-bedroom, and there's 16 people living. There's a problem, and so the starting point is to admit that there's an issue. And while you're talking about federal dollars, the current project that I'm working on, we're actually privately funded. But for municipalities and cities, first of all, you need to acknowledge there's an issue and access the funding that is available, allocate the funds in the appropriate areas, because these individuals have the potential to become intellectual assets and contributing members of the society if they so had the chance. Some people already had the chance and maybe fell through the cracks. Some people haven't had the chance to begin with, because of the cards they were dealt in life. And it's just important to see what the needs are in everyone's community and allocate funds appropriately. You see a major gap, right? You have high socioeconomic individuals, and then people in the low end, and then that middle class is, the gap is becoming wider.
Yeah.
We got to decrease the gap.
Yeah, the middle class is beginning to shrink throughout the U.S. As most people are starting to see and feel, no matter who's in office, Democrat or Republican.
Right.
What are some of the initiatives you started talking about? Some of them. What are some of the initiatives that are happening there in Harrison that you're a part of?
Well, I'm a co-founder of a nonprofit, it's 501c3, Hope 929, where we help disempowered groups and provide them tools to become more self-sufficient. And we have 4 foundational pillars within our foundation, which is education, public safety, community development, and social justice outreach. And I would say that social justice outreach is the heartbeat of what we do. It's what inspired our organization to come about, because we were noticing so many people seeking justice around the country who were lacking tools and resources in support of overcoming tragedy. And we wanted to provide tools. And then we expanded on that, and we wanted to help communities, and we wanted to empower businesses and connect the dots of existing businesses. We don't want to reinvent the wheel in any community, but we want to have the largest economic impact in every community in which we operate. And so I wanted to start in the community where I live, and I chose to raise my children here in Harrison, Arkansas. As an educator, I would see students coming through my classrooms, and they didn't have a home to go home to. They slept in their cars, and they were going home with food bags. And it just pulls your heartstrings to the point where it's like, we got to do something. I have a student that just left my house today, a former student. She lost her mother, and she doesn't have everything that she needs, and you just want to do what you can. I actually, over the summer, had 2 ladies living in my house, middle-aged 50-year-old women, because they were struggling at that point in time. They just needed that hand up. And I think if we look at the problems in our society as, instead of giving them a temporary fix and handing out an item, think about giving them a hand up to help their mindset to begin with. So I was very inspired. I went to a groundbreaking ceremony for an apartment complex. There was over 200 or 300 units that were going in, which is great because there's a huge housing need across the board, but these are not affordable housing units. So I was like, okay. I went to my board and I said, we need to get in touch with the people in the grant sector who we had networked with the year prior, and we put in a proposal. So we had in our plan, our brilliant plan, we had put a 30-unit complex from efficiencies to 3 bedrooms. We're including a community resource center where we'll have a caseworker to assess the needs of all the residents, to help them connect them to the resources within the community. And we'll have classes to help increase financial literacy. And then on top of that, we're going to have a call center, a 50-person call center. So we'll have 50 plus jobs for members of this community. And there's been so many misconceptions of why we're bringing this to Harrison because of our affiliations with individuals in our organization and what our mission is across the country. And it's just very unfortunate because we've received so much pushback, and I've felt attacked as my character, as a mother, as a woman, as a politician. It's incredible how people can base their experiences and their understandings and spew hate through the process of an organization just coming in wanting to, at the end of the day, help that particular community.
This program that you're working on, so the facility that you're building for them to live in, is it something that they can permanently stay there, or is it something that, hey, you're giving them like a 3 to 4 year window and then you want to bring in somebody new? Because I'm assuming you're hoping that it helps them get a leg up to move on and outward.
Right. We want to help create a mindset of these families coming through to become homeowners, so within the Community Resource Center, we are still in the preliminary phase of designing what the program is going to look like. And we've been talking with our case manager, but we're still building, we're still needing to build the facility. But we, it will be, we're not going to kick them out after a certain amount of time. Ideally, it would be nice if they could come in for the year, they get the tools that they need, they get the support, and then they no longer even will qualify for housing assistance because they're going to be making so much money. And they have that mindset to go after life and accomplish their goals and live out their purpose of who they're supposed to be. So many people are struggling and operating at a lower level than where they have the potential to be fulfilling their dreams and their goals because they're stuck in survival mindset, and that's real. And there's so many people in our country operating in survival mode.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, that's across the board, across the whole U.S. We have some people that are just stuck in the survival mode. What I found is most people don't even want to have a hand given to them. They really want to be independent, but sometimes it just takes that little extra from the community to help boost those that are in need. Let's let's dig a little deeper. This is a tough year. This is a tough year for the whole landscape of the United States, in the United States as well as outside of the U.S. Many of the families that are abroad due to military, or some people that are just living abroad but due to work. How is your community dealing with this election cycle that's taking place?
Well, we're in a more of a red community, and in anyone different or with different ideas, I consider myself more in the middle, and that's a interesting place to be because I've read some articles that there's a shift happening where people are not trusting the government and not satisfied with the way things have panned out and consider themselves an independent voter, but yet they feel forced or pressured to have to vote one way or the other. And within this particular community, they're more, I would say, the far right side of the political spectrum. I'm not sure what more details you want regarding that.
Well, so let's take the organizations that you're a part of. Hope 929.
Yes, Hope 929.
How is that working out in a red area? Because typically most red, they think of things from the perspective like we don't want to be given anything. We don't want that. So how are you balancing that?
Well, it's interesting because in one breath, people are saying it's important to serve, it's important to help and lend a helping hands, but in another breath, it's not in our backyard. And it feels, if I'm just going to be real and frank, it feels like I'm still living in the 60s. I didn't live in the 60s. I didn't experience it firsthand, but the type of behavior that I'm seeing since implementing this project and sharing this with the community, I'm seeing ideals aligned with those living in the 60s of segregation era. And I can give you an example. I'm just going to go, I've received a lot of hate mail because some people don't believe in mixing races even. And we're in 2024 races, one race, human race, but in our reality, we're separated by the color of our skin and our socioeconomic class. And people there's some radical groups sending hate mail. I mean, I got this talking about Obama. I mean,
wow.
Yeah, I can't. Can you see?
Yep.
My off camera? There we go. There's just radicals on both sides. There's radicals on the left. There's radicals on the right. And I mean, when people hold up BLM, this is what people said: BLM, blacks
looting and murdering. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I'm even more vulgar, and I don't want to spread all the negativity that's going on because there's a small percentage of individuals who have their extreme ideas, and they are the loudest. They are the loudest, and they stir their power this day. The hate groups, whether it's the KKK or the neo-Nazi, their power that they have is within their false propaganda and their smear campaigns and going to sabotage businesses that associate with us or our contractors or because of their false ideas, because of their experiences and how they were brought up to believe a certain way of, I would call it superiority complex. So they want to not allow the change to occur. And like you were saying, some individuals on the red side don't want handouts. They want to be independent. And I think independence is important, and autonomy. And, you have that accomplished feeling when you go out after something and you go get it yourself. But there are people that are struggling, and sometimes we just need that boost and assistance temporarily, but you want to get them, transition them out of it, and create mindsets where I can become who I'm supposed to become. And so then they become the leaders of the next person struggling, because we're also working on projects in other communities. And I don't want this to intersect with what I'm doing here in Harrison, but because one of the biggest misinformation that's being spread about this project is that we are busing Black people in, we are busing immigrants, we are busing Muslims and from prisons to this 30 units, and there's over 200 people that are waiting for an affordable place to live with a voucher. That's not to mention the multi-families and households looking for their own house. So it's a very interesting climate and dynamic. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Trying to help people. What were you thinking? What were you thinking to get a political seat? I came in a non-traditional way. I did not run a campaign. I was not elected. I was actually appointed unanimously. There was a vacant seat that came available last year. And I put in my resume and I went up against 5 highly qualified older white males and presented why I thought it would be a good fit. And here I am on city council, and it's been definitely a huge learning curve, and I'm excited for this opportunity. But I feel, because of my affiliation within this social justice world of helping groups that have been pushed to the side, have been systematically oppressed over centuries, people in this community have a misconception of who I am, and they fear the unknown. They fear change.
It's interesting. It's interesting hearing what you're saying, because the community that you're part of are socioeconomically marginalized, but they don't realize that. They just look at it as somebody's taking from them. From what it sounds like, I don't know. I don't know the people in the community. What really is it? The overarching demographic, like when you have to say, like, what is it, white to Black there, and even Latino?
I believe it's 96% white, and I think 0.1% Black, and I'll have to look at the other stats. But yeah, it's a predominantly white community. It's very interesting, the history. This community has many stains of hatred, just like other towns in the South. It was a sundown town. There was race riots in the early 1900s. In the early 1900s, there was a 10% thriving Black community, churches, and people got along. A railroad came in, and there was more influx of Black individuals that came, and people started to feel threatened. And then there was a big riot, and they ran the Blacks out of town. And I believe only one individual stayed at that time. One Black individual stayed. And so there was a lot of reconciliation that happened over the years. And there are many people in this community who have worked tirelessly to help change the narrative. The Harrison Community Task Force on Race Relations was established 20 years ago. And it was a small group of older white people that wanted to change the image because they saw the negative effects of having a false label of being the most racist town in the nation. It was affecting the community economically. It was affecting students who would leave Harrison and go to college and be automatically stamped as a racist because of where they came from. And they wanted to do something about it. And so they became, I would say they were more reactive to situations that would occur. And, over time, they're starting to become more proactive. I joined that when I moved here. I'm raising culturally mixed children. And for those who don't know, of your audience. That's part of why I'm so passionate about what I do. You know, even my father, I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, a very diverse community, attended the most diverse high school in the nation. So we had people from all over the world. And then coming from a community like that to a predominantly white community, raising mixed children, I felt a need to get involved and make sure that my children are being treated fairly. And, you know, it's sad that there's still the teachings of the white is right and superior, because, I mean, my son came home not too long ago saying that there's kids calling him a monkey, and it's absolutely not okay.
Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, because that's stuff that myself and my brother used to hear. We're talking 40, almost 50, well, 40 something years ago. So, yeah, I mean, things haven't changed. But you know what? We're still it's going to get better. It is going to get better. I'm walking in that authority that things are going to be better.
I believe it.
Let's
because of people like you and I talking about it. It starts with talking and addressing the issues firsthand, head on.
Absolutely. Let's talk about continue down this road with politics this season, because there's a lot of societal disillusionment. You know, why do you think constituents are so cynical this year? They just don't believe in either party. What do you think, from your thought, is causing this?
Why are constituents so cynical? You know, I think the lack of trust and the letdown over time. You know, when you look at history and the experiences of political turmoil, you know, how much have they been able to accomplish? Some people still feel like their vote doesn't even matter. There's so many factors that go into why our constituents so cynical. You know, even the groups that we're serving, those who are disenfranchised and marginalized, if they continue to feel marginalized, and they can't put their trust in the leaders who are supposed to be their voice, their soundboard, their change makers, their support, the policymakers, and follow through. And if there's no accountability being held, I think there's a whole mixture of why people feel the way they feel in this political climate in today's age.
How do you judge if what you're trying to accomplish or what you're trying to implement is even working, even on smaller levels or larger levels?
Firsthand experiences is how I personally judge, but you know, there are experts that you could bring into a community on subject matter experts to identify, is policy really working in your community? But for me, the way I've been moving is direct research and going to the individuals who we're serving. Hey, would this help you reach the next step in life for you? Hey, if we connect, you just identify what the needs are first within the community. We have homeless shelters are illegal in the community where I live, which is sad. But there is homeless programs where people will feed, you know, breakfast and lunch, but then people are on their own at dinner, you know, so maybe finding an organization that wants to fill that need. And then our program that we're implementing is the next step up. So they're getting some supplies, the basic essentials, they're getting some classes to be able to go know how to apply for housing vouchers, and then they get their housing vouchers, and then there's nowhere to go because there's not enough housing. So we're like that next step. So how do you assess, is policy working? Is the change makers really effectuating that positive social shifts that we need to see in our society? It's meeting the needs. And then it's going to be the long-term effects. The data is going to be, you know, accounted for over time. The success stories, the case studies over time, that's how you're going to really see, you know, the numbers, getting people off the streets, reducing recidivism. Okay, if you have 70% recidivism right now, what kind of programs can you implement to reduce it down to 30%? That's how you're going to see the change. So what do you got to do? You need to have more reentry programs. You need to have more preventative programs. You need to have more mental health awareness. You need to start teaching more social emotional learning in schools and not just academics. There's so many factors that tie into the issues in our society. And how do you assess, is policy working? One, you have to own that there's a problem. There's no community in our country that's perfect. There's always room for improvement. And so you look at other communities, countries, who's doing it right, who has lower crime rates, who has the least amount of recidivism rates, who has, the less gun violence. Why is that? You have to research and be open to implementing solutions and open to change. So many people are afraid of change because they like things the way they are. They're comfortable. It takes money, it takes risk. It's like a business. If you believe in something enough, it takes risk to go after it.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Liz. As you are a friend of the Media Society, what do you hope that they take away from hearing what you are talking about and what you're doing in Harrison, Arkansas? I think there's so much in what you said. How can you summarize it? What do you want people to take away from what you're accomplishing there?
I guess my hope for people is to think outside of your ordinary thought process. Think beyond what your day-to-day experience is and start thinking more about others and society as a whole and the future generations to come, because the one thing that we get to leave behind in this world is the impact and our interactions that we have with individuals day in and day out. And if we're just egotistically thinking, prideful thinking, what can I get out of this, and not thinking in a servant hearted way, as a servant heart, I just believe our society would be a lot better off, becoming more of an empathetic individual, compassionate. So take what you want with it. It's every day is a learning opportunity, and we all fall short at times, and we all can get caught up in our pride and our ego, but it's just about challenging that. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Liz Darden. You've been great. Really appreciate you stopping by the Media Society. We've learned a lot. People don't really realize how much is going on in different parts of the U.S. You only hear about New York, D.C., California, Florida, those states. Really, there's a whole nother world that people have to understand that helps drive the motion and the engine of the United States. Places just like Harrison, Arkansas. Thank you so much for attending, and I thank each of you for listening and viewing the Media Society. I'm your host, Anthony Mitchell, and I'm out.